manonood.
Isang magiting na araw ng Sabado, mga kababayan sa Luzon, Visayas at Mindanao, ganun din po sa ating mga kababayan sa buong mundo. Ngayong araw po, April 9, 2022, ay ginugunita at inaalala ang Araw ng Kagitingan, ika-80 taong anibersaryo. Ngayong araw ay aalalahanin natin ang kabayanihan at ang sakripisyo at kagitingan ng mga Pilipinong nakipaglaban at nanindigan para sa kalayaan ng ating minamahal na bansang Pilipinas. Ngayong araw po ay andito ako sa dambana ng Kagitingan sa Mount Samat National Shrine sa bayan po ng Pilar sa probinsya ng Bataan, kung saan maya-maya ay isasagawa na yung mismong programa. Kaya po samahan nyo ako sa isang maikli pero makabuluhang programa at talakayan maya-maya lamang. Ako po si Alan Francisco. Mga kababayan, ngayong taon, ang tema ng pagdiriwang o pagunita sa Araw ng Kagitingan ay kagitingan ng mga veterano, inspirasyon ng nagkakaisang Pilipino. Ngayong 2022 na lang po ulit, nagkaroon ng physical event dahil nga yan sa pag-iingat sa pagkalat ng COVID-19 noong 2020 at 2021. Bayan, maya-maya po ay makakasama natin sa programa ang ilang mga panauhin tulad ni Secretary of Justice Menardo Guevara. Nariyan din si Ambassador Koshikawa Kazuhiko mula po sa Embahada ng Japan, si Ms. Heather Variaba, ang Chargé d'Affaires mula sa Embahada ng Estados Unidos. Susubukan po natin silang makapanayam mamaya at alamin yung importansya ng paggunita sa event ngayong araw. Bayan, bago simulan mismo yung programa mamaya, ay ikwento ko lamang yung mangyayari maya-maya lamang. Hawak ko po mismo yung programa, no? So sa part 1 po o sa part 1 ng programa, nariyan yung unveiling of 24/7 marker. Susundan yan ng part 2, ang singing of anthems, yung mga pambansang awit ng 3 bansa. Unang-una dyan, ang pambansang awit na lupang hinirang ng ating Pilipinas. Pangalawa, ang pambansang awit ng bansang Japan. At ikatlo ay ang pambansang awit ng Estados Unidos. Susundan yan sa part 3 ng event, ang high-end o ang high-speed opener pass ng AFP o ng Armed Forces of the Philippines. Ang part 4 po bayan ay ang wreath-laying ceremony na pangunahan ni Secretary Menardo Guevara ng Department of Justice. Kasama niya si His Excellency Koshikawa Kazuhiko, ang ambassador po ng bansang Japan. Nariyan din si Ms. Heather Variaba, ang Chargé d'Affaires ng Embassy of the United States of America. Ang part 5 po bayan ay ang invocation na pangunahan ni Most Reverend Ruperto C. Santos Didi ng Diocese of Balanga. Susundan yan ng ceremonial bell tolling na pangunahan ng isang grade 7 student ng Jose C. Payumo Memorial High School sa Dinalupihan District na si Ms. Shehe Razade Danoog. Kasama niya si Mr. Miguel Angelo Villarreal, ang National Executive Vice President ng BFP Sons and Daughters Association Incorporated. Magkakaroon din po ng welcome remarks mula kay Bataan Governor Albert Garcia. Bayan, ilang minuto mula ngayon sa aking kanan, nakikita niyo po, ay magsisimula na yung program proper. Nakita ko nang dumaan dito sa aking tabi, no, yung mga opisyal ng pamahalaan. At nariyan na nga po si Secretary of Justice Menardo Guevara ang opisyal ng gobyerno na siyang mangunguna sa paggunita ng Araw ng Kagitingan
Stated in the
ngayong
Republic Act
araw.
8491, the flag and heraldic code of the
Makasaysayan bayan
Philippines,
ang
the
pangyayaring
Philippine
ito
flag shall be permanently
dahil
hoisted on this
ulitin ko
side
lamang
24/7
ngayong
throughout the
2022
year
na lang
and shall
ulit
be
nagkaroon ng
illuminated
physical
at
event
night.
dahil 2020 at 2021 ay puro online lamang yung ginawa para makaiwas sa pagkalat ng COVID-19. Ipagpatuloy ko lamang bayan yung programa.
Joined by the other distinguished personalities at the dambana ng Kagitingan.
Halapunan, handa, dala, kalis. Tanghal! Ta!
Ladies and gentlemen, the national anthems of the Republic of the Philippines, Japan, and the United States of America.
Halapunan, mga pinuno at kawal, tanghal. Ta! Handa, dala, kalis. Baba! Ha! Ginoo, handa na po ang pag-aalay.
Well, before proceeding with the wreath-laying ceremony, we just had the high-speed opener pass of the AFA-50PH Fighting Eagle, the primary air asset utilized during the combat air operations in Marawi City against the ISIS-inspired terrorists. The FA-50 Agila ng Pilipinas to this day has proven to be the most lethal weapon system able to perform a diverse and versatile role in performing air defense and surface attack of the Philippine Air Force. The FA-50 air assets are being operated by the 5th Fighter Wing, the home of the country's frontline fighters and the jet trainers. We shall proceed with the wreath-laying ceremony. The first to offer the wreath, we have the Charge d'Affaires ad Interim, Embassy of the United States of America, Ms. Heather Variava. Well, meantime, we have the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Embassy of Japan, His Excellency Koshikawa Kazuhiko. And this time, we have the Charge d'Affaires ad Interim, Embassy of the United States of America, Ms. Heather Variava. And this time, the guest of honor and speaker, Secretary Minardo I. Guevara of the Department of Justice will now be offering the wreath at the Dambana ng Kagitingan to be accompanied by the Commander of the Northern Luzon Command Armed Forces of the Philippines, Lieutenant General Ernesto C. Torres, Jr.
Teleponan, handa, dala, kalis. Tanghal! Ha! Kalipunan, mga pinuno at kawal, tanghal. Ta! handa, dala, kalis. Baba! Ta! Tanghal! Ta! Kalipunan, tanghal. Ta! Kalipunan, baba. Ta! Handa, dala, kalis. Baba! Ta! Pino, tapos na po ang pag-aalay.
Well, that ends the wreath-laying ceremony here at the Dambana ng Kagitingan. Well, sirs, ma'am, please remain where you are as we'll be having now the pictorial to be joined by the members of the Technical Working Committee as well as the LGU officials.
Sir, dyan na.
Sure yan. Dalawang chopper yun. Dalawang sopol.
Ito mic mo. Ito na ang gamitin mo mic. Pag may interview. May interview natin. Pwede ka na magpa.
Well, in a short while, we'll proceed with the program proper, and may we now invite our guest of honor and speaker and other distinguished guests.
Bayan, nagpapatuloy po yung programa dito sa Dambana ng Kagitingan sa Mount Samat National Shrine dito sa bayan ng Pilar sa probinsya pa rin ng Bataan, kung saan ay ginugunita at inaalala natin yung ika-80 anibersaryo ng Araw ng Kagitingan. Ongoing po yung programa sa mga sandaling ito at katatapos lamang mag-alay ng bulaklak o itong wreath-laying ceremony na pinangunahan ni Justice Secretary Minardo Guevara. Kasama niya bayan sa nag-alay ng bulaklak ang kinatawan ng Embahada ng Japan na si His Excellency Koshikawa Kazuhiko at ang Chargé d'Affaires ng Estados Unidos o ng US Embassy na si Miss Heather Variava. Bayan, habang andito kami at nakikinig at nakikita mismo yung mismong sitwasyon, ramdam namin yung emosyon habang nag-aalay ng bulaklak yung mga opisyal. Wari nagbalik yung talagang pag-alala natin sa sakripisyo ng mga sundalong Pilipino na talagang lumaban para sa kalayaan ng bansa at talagang nanindigan para makamit natin yung inaasam na paglaya. mula sa mga mananakop. Bayan, sa mga sandaling ito, ang nakikita ninyo ngayon sa inyong TV screen ay naglalakad na yung mga opisyal ng gobyerno. I think papunta na sila rito sa stage mismo kung saan inaasahan na magbibigay ng kanilang mga mensahe ang mga opisyal ng gobyerno. Pangunahan yan, magbibigay ng welcome remarks ang gobernador ng province o Bataan na si Governor Albert S. Garcia. Magbibigay rin po ng mensahe bayan si His Excellency Koshikawa Kazuhiko ng Embahada ng Japan at si Ms. Heather Variaba ng US Embassy. Inaasahan din pong magbibigay ng kanyang mensahe si Justice Secretary Minardo Guevara. Bayan, kung nakikita nyo ngayon yung stage, no, ang sabi ng NHCP o ang National Historical Commission of the Philippines, 80 seats yung inilagay nila dyan. Symbolic yan dahil ibig sabihin ng 80 seats, 80 years ng anibersaryo ng pag-alala sa Araw ng Kagitingan. Bukod sa mga opisyal ng gobyerno bayan, naririto rin, of course, yung mga kababayan nating veterano at yung kanilang mga kamag-anak. Kanina nga, baka sa kanilang mga muka, yung emosyon dahil naaalala nila yung kanilang paikipaglaban noon nung unang panahon habang sila lumalaban sa mga mananakop. Bayan, pakinggan ulit natin at panoorin ang mismong programa.
Divinity, Diocese of Balanga.
Let us remember that we're in the holy presence of God and these hallowed grounds of heroes. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, the Lord be with you. Makapangyarihang Diyos, buting Ama, ikaw ay dakila. Ikaw may likha ng langit at lupa. Nasa iyo nagmula ang aming buhay. Ikaw rin ang nagkakalob sa amin ng aming ikinabubuhay. Marami pong salamat sa buhay na iyong bigay. Maraming salamat din sa mga tao na nagpapaganda, nagpapabuti, at nagpapahalaga sa aming buhay. At maraming salamat din sa aming mga bayani at veterano na nagpakasakit, nagtanggol at sa huli ay nagbuwis ng buhay para sa aming kalayaan, para sa aming karapatan at para sa aming kapayapaan. Tanggapin mo po sila sa iyong kaharian at pagkalooban ng buhay na walang hanggan. Sa iyong patnubay kagandahang loob o makapangyarihang Diyos, naway hindi namin sayangin, hindi namin aksayahin, hindi namin baliwalain ang lahat ng kanyang pinaghirapan, ang lahat ng ipinaglaban, at lahat ang itinaya sa kanilang sariling buhay. Sa amin ngayong tinatamasang panibagong buhay ay aming iingatan at hindi pababayaan, aalagaan at hindi paglalaruan, pagyayamanin at hindi sisirain. Sa amin ngayong nakamit na kalayaan ay aming higit na igagalang, higit na isusulong, at higit na isasabuhay sa aming pagkilala at pagtanggap ng karapatan at karangalan ng aming kapwa. At ngayon nga, o butihing Ama, sa aming pang-araw-araw na pamumuhay dito sa lupa, sa iyong awa at pagmamalasakit, ay hindi lamang maging mapayapa, bagkus maging makatarungan, hindi lamang maayos, bagkus makatao, gumagalang sa kalikasan, hindi lamang matuwid, bagkus totoo, malinis sa mapalakin at gawain. Ito'y aming hiling sa pamagitan ni Jesucristo naming Panginoon, sa ngalan ng Ama, ng Anak, at Espiritu Santo. Amen.
Please remain standing for the ceremonial bell tolling with Scheherazade P. Danoog, grade 7 student, of Jose C. Payumo Memorial High School, Dinalupihan District, and Mr. Miguel Angelo C. Villarreal, the National Executive Vice President of the Veterans Federation of the Philippine Sons and Daughters Association, Incorporated, or VFP, SDI.
Liberation of the Philippines, 1945. The liberation of the Philippines was not earned for free. Let us give a moment of silence for those who paid the price of freedom for our motherland. It is for them that the bell tolls. First, for the defenders of Bataan and Corregidor who fell victims to the infamous death march. They clung to life and refused to die until they could refuse no more. Second, for the Filipino and foreign forces who bitterly fought and died for the liberation of the Philippines. Through perilous seas, ruined towns, and jungle-clad mountains, they crawled their way to victory to liberate the motherland. Third, for the civilians who perished in the flames of war, caught in the crossfire of warring nations, nostalgic of the past, uncertain of the future, they endured through sickness and starvation in hopes of a peaceful tomorrow. Fourth, for the guerrillas and civilians who, without certain back pay or recognition, fought like enlisted soldiers and commissioned officers. They went to the fray out of self-will, facing the severe consequences of retribution and death from the enemy. Fifth, for the officials and civil servants who remained behind enemy lines while others fled. With a firm conviction of serving the country until the very end, they offered the supreme sacrifice and faced execution. Sixth, for the women and children tortured and killed in the most atrocious ways. May their harrowing stories never be forgotten and ignored. Justice alone can give them rest. And lastly, for the living veterans who carry the stories and legacies of bravery and valor, especially of their fallen comrades. Through them, we learn the heroism of Filipinos, even the smallest and simplest contributions they gave for the motherland. Their presence is an honor for all of us. We will remember those who fell in their night so we may rise to see the dawn. They bequeathed us life and liberty, and as well as the duty to cherish and defend them like they did 77 years ago. In the present, let us work for the peace that our forebears fought and died for.
Thank you. Please be seated. To our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant morning. On the commemoration of this 80th anniversary of the Araw ng Kagitingan, to formally welcome everyone, we have Governor Albert S. Garcia of the province of Bataan.
A pleasant morning to one and all. Before I continue, may I invite everyone to give a big round of applause to our beloved veterans. "80 years ago, the world stood up and listened to the voice of freedom as it defined the meaning of indomitable spirit. I open quote, "Men fighting under the banner of unshakable faith are made of something more than flesh, but they are not made of impervious steel. The flesh must yield at last, endurance melts away, and the end of the battle must come. Bataan has fallen, but the spirit that made it stand, a beacon to all the liberty-loving peoples of the world, cannot fall." End of quote. Mula po dito sa tuktok ng bundok Samat, sa pusod ng lalawigan ng Bataan, hatid namin sa inyong lahat ang aming taus-pusong paanyaya sa paggunita ng ika-80 taon ng Araw ng Kagitingan. On behalf of our Most Reverend Bishop Ruperto Santos, Diocese of Balanga, our government officials from the province of Bataan, and the warm, peace-loving, hospitable people of our province, we extend our warmest welcome to our guest of honor and speaker, Secretary Minardo Guevara of the Department of Justice, Ms. Heather Variava, Charge d'Affaires, Deputy Chief for Administration, American Embassy, His Excellency Koshikawa Kazuniko, Ambassador Extraordinaire, Embassy of Japan, Dr. Rene Escalante, Chairman of the NHCP, Yusek Ernesto Carolina of PIVAO, Yusek Reynaldo Mapagu of PIVAO, members of the Diplomatic Corps, officers and members of the Department of National Defense, Armed Forces, and the Philippine National Police, government departments from the national level, regional level, and the local level, sa aming mga bisita at sa ating lahat. Ating panauhin, inilalatag po namin ang mainit na pagtanggap ng buong lalawigan ng Bataan. Naririto po muli tayo upang gunitain ang kabayanihan ng ating mga veterano. Ito po ay upang ipadama sa kanila sa naiwan nilang pamilya at mga mahal sa buhay na ang ginawa nilang sakripisyo, ang pag-aalay ng kanilang dugo at buhay ay hindi kailanman malilimutan. 80 taon na ang nakalipas, tapos na ang digmaan, ang naiwan sa atin ay ang diwa at alaala ng kabayanihan. Kabayanihan kailangan natin, lalong-lalo ngayon na habang pinipilit nating bumangon sa pandemya ng COVID-19 at meron na namang bagong pahirap sa ating buhay dulot ng gera sa Russia at Ukraine, muli po tinitignan natin ang ating mga veterano upang humugot ng lakas at inspirasyon para maging matatag, harapin ang mga bagong paghamon na ito. Kaya muli, maraming salamat sa ating mga veterano sa pambihirang ambag ninyo sa ating bayan at sa mga ehemplong ipinakita ninyo sa amin. So once again, my dear friends, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, as we warmly welcome everyone in this sacred event, let us together commemorate not only the events that transpired during World War II, but more importantly, the sacrifices, bravery, and patriotism of our beloved veterans. Bataan may have fallen 8 decades ago, but the triumph of the spirit of our veterans will live on in our hearts forever. Mabuhay po ang ating mga veterano at mabuhay po tayong lahat.
Well, thank you very much to Governor Albert S. Garcia of the province of Bataan. We'll now hear the message of the Ambassador, Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Embassy of Japan, His Excellency Koshikawa Kazuhiko.
Honorable Menardo Guevara, Secretary of Justice, and Dr. Rene Escalante, Chairman, National Historical Commission of the Philippines, Honorable Alberto Garcia, Governor of Bataan, Honorable Heather Bariaba, Chargé d'Affaires, the United States of America, Embassy here, and Honorable Leonardo Mapag, Under Secretary, Department of Defense. Fellow ambassadors, distinguished veterans and guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Magandang umaga po. I'm deeply honored to join all of you to solemnly commemorate the 80th anniversary of Araw ng Kagitingan. This is the first time I'm attending this event in person at this historic site with very scenic surroundings. I wish to congratulate the National Historical Commission of the Philippines as well as the province of Bataan for making this possible through their resolute effort to control and manage the COVID-19 pandemic. First and foremost, on behalf of the government of Japan, I'd like to express my heartfelt condolences to those who suffered and were sacrificed during those fateful days. As ambassador of the country once on the opposing side, my participation clearly shows the enduring peace and friendship our two nations have nurtured since then. Today, we are friends closer than brothers, one made possible by the Filipino people's forgiving heart and the relentless effort of both our predecessors. It is for this that I am most grateful to all those who have paved the way toward our exceptionally amicable relation today. Secondly, allow me to commend the remarkable achievement of the Philippine people. But the situation is starting to normalize since the pandemic began 2 years ago. And the cases have dropped significantly after the Omicron surge early this year. Owing to this positive development, cross-border travel has resumed, and we are gradually welcoming tourists from Japan. Especially, I'd like to echo the President Duterte's tribute to the selfless and dedicated frontliners whose unyielding commitment has been simply admirable. Thirdly, despite the hardship posed by the pandemic, the bilateral cooperation between Japan and the Philippines has dramatically deepened in the various fields. These include revitalization of the Philippine economies through the numerous big-ticket infrastructure projects, facilitation of the Mindanao peace process, and modernization of the Philippine Coast Guard maritime law enforcement capacity. Japan is honored to be here, always here, for the Philippines, and continue to closely cooperate on the various issues and concerns. Finally, many people suffered and lost their lives due to the fierce battles between Japan and the United States here in the Philippines during the Second World War. We, the Japanese, must never forget this. I strongly believe that my very presence as the ambassador of Japan on this solemn occasion alongside Just Secretary Menard Guevara, Governor Albert Garcia, and Charge d'Affaires Heather Barriaba is the strongest message for those who died here, and expression of us making amends more seriously than anything else. On this very spot, we renew our total commitment to further deepening our friendship and cooperation with the Philippines and the United States. I'd like to conclude my message by offering once again my deepest sympathies to those who lost their loved ones and suffered here. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po.
Well, thank you very much, His Excellency Koshikawa Kazuhiko, the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Embassy of Japan. This time, may we now hear the message from the United States Charge d'Affaires ad interim Embassy of the United States of America, Ms. Heather Barriaba.
Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara, Undersecretary Ernesto Carolina, and Undersecretary Ronaldo Mabacu of the Department of National Defense, Undersecretary Ramon Coloping of the Philippine Information Agency, Japanese Ambassador Koshikawa Kazuhiko, Australian Ambassador Stephen Robinson, Most Reverend Father Roberto Santos, Bataan Governor Albert Garcia, Chairman of the National Historic Commission of the Philippines, Dr. Rene Escalante, Postmaster General Norman Fulgencio, Veterans Federation of the Philippines President Cesar Pobre, Executive Vice President Mike Villarreal of the Veterans Federation of the Philippine Sons and Daughters Association, members of the Philippine government and of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, and most especially our esteemed and beloved veterans, families, and their loved ones, ladies and gentlemen. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. It is a very great honor for me to represent the United States today while we pay tribute to the heroic Philippine and American soldiers, among others, who fought and died on this and around this mountain 80 years ago during the Battle of Bataan. On behalf of the United States, I offer our reverence for their sacrifice, our admiration for their devotion, and our eternal gratitude for their legacy. In 2018, the United States Embassy participated and partnered with the Department of National Defense Philippines Veterans Affairs Office to host a first ceremony to award a U.S. Congressional Gold Medals to Philippine veterans of World War II and their families. The Congressional Gold Medal is one of the highest civilian honors in the United States, awarded in recognition of those whose services and achievements helped shape American history. Since that first ceremony, similar ceremonies have occurred in Baguio, Iloilo, and here in Bataan. Last week, I had the honor to award the U.S. Congressional Gold Medals in person to one living veteran and 22 surviving family members at Camp Aguinaldo. That ceremony was one of the most meaningful and inspiring experiences I have had here in the Philippines. Filipino World War II veterans shaped the history of both the Philippines and the United States. We all owe them an immeasurable debt of gratitude for their valor and their sacrifice. 80 years ago, tens of thousands of Philippine soldiers and civilians, many without any formal military training, took up arms and fought side by side with American soldiers in defense of their homeland and for the cause of freedom. It is hard for us to imagine the apprehensions of the Philippine and American troops on that day in 1942. Many of them would not survive the starvation, exhaustion, and violence that would take place in the days that followed. Because of their exceptional legacy of valor, the Philippine people and the Philippine nation will always have the profound thanks and greatest respect of the American people. That's something that was forged by history and retains its significance today as we face new and critical, compelling challenges that confront both our countries and the world. It is a testament to the power of freedom and democracy that we also face today's challenges alongside Japan, our trusted partner in peace. As we recognize and honor Filipino veterans this week, it is important to acknowledge the courage of the soldiers and civilians in Ukraine who are fighting for the same principles of freedom and democracy that underpin our alliance here. The United States stands with Ukraine, and we are proud to have voted alongside the Philippines, Australia, and Japan, among others, in the United Nations to condemn Russia's unjustified invasion of Ukraine. We stand united with our ally, the Philippines, and this year we mark the 75th anniversary of our diplomatic relationship. As friends, partners, and allies, the story of our cooperation through the decades makes us proud. Our countries have accomplished great things together. The alliance that we established following World War II continues to unite and inspire generations of Americans and Filipinos. This month, thousands of American and Filipino service members worked together in combined exercise Balakatan to continue building trust and partnership between our militaries. Together, today, we can admire a quality, valor, that was on display so clearly on this peninsula 80 years ago. It's a single word, but it encompasses so much: courage, bravery, commitment, and dedication to one's country and one's cause, and a readiness to make the ultimate sacrifice, as so many did. Today is a day to recommit to the quest for peace so that future generations will not experience the horrors of those who lived through wars and conflicts. To all the veterans joining us today, thank you for your service. It is an honor to be with you here today on behalf of the United States. Thank you. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much to Ms. Heather Variava, the Chargé d'Affaires at Interim Embassy of the United States of America. Well, at this point, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome the guest of honor, Secretary Bernardo I. Guevara, Department of Justice.
Please have a seat. Honorable Albert Garcia, Governor of the Province of Bulacan. Of Bataan, I'm sorry. Taga Bulacan po kasi ako. Honorable officials of the Municipality of Pilar, Bataan. His Excellency Koshikawa Kazuhiko, Ambassador of Japan to the Philippines. Madam Heather Variava, Chargé d'Affaires of the United States Embassy in the Philippines. Ambassador Stephen Robinson of the Government of Australia. Other members of the Diplomatic Corps. Dr. Rene Escalante, Chairman of the National Historical Commission of the Philippines. Most Reverend Ruperto Santos Didi, Bishop of the Diocese of Balanga. Officers and members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Philippine National Police, our beloved Filipino war veterans and their families, distinguished guests, my fellow members in the cabinet represented by their undersecretaries, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant morning to all. I proudly stand here before you today sa Araw ng Kagitingan to deliver the message of our President, His Excellency Rodrigo Roa Duterte, and to extol the persistent heroism of the Filipino. Exactly 80 years ago today, around 75,000 Filipino and American soldiers were forced to take a 65-mile trek from this province by their Japanese captors. Thousands of them died, unable to survive the extreme heat and torturous journey. Their ordeal is what we commemorate today as the infamous Bataan Death March. This march is but one of the many proofs of war's unspeakable cruelty and inhumanity. 80 years hence, our forebears' harrowing experience of how the Second World War played out in the Pacific Theater remains in our collective memory. This memory survives not only in our recorded history, it also continues to reverberate in the still pained recollection of the remnants of that generation who have lived to tell their story. The war's pains and suffering come to us in tales of the precious peace that was shattered, the countless loved ones lost too soon, and the unending torment of those who lived through but never really survived the ordeal. It is the recognition of this undeniable sacrifice of an entire generation that forces us to look more deeply at the Bataan Death March, never as evidence of their defeat, but as proof beyond doubt of the heroism of our people and their allies. Years before their march, many of these soldiers were men and women who lived the most common and ordinary lives. They were fisher folks and farmers, craftsmen and merchants, bureaucrats and salaried employees, doting fathers and devoted mothers. And yet, at the sound of the call for the defense of our motherland, they stood ready and expressed in no uncertain terms their firm refusal to bow to any foreign oppressor. For months, they stood ground without naval and aerial support, undeterred by starvation and disease, and most of all, exhibited courage in the face of an overpowering invader. It is their unbelievable sacrifice which gives those two short lines ensconced in our national anthem, "Sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiil," their most realistic and vivid expression. The irrefutable heroism of the Filipino has been affirmed time and again in our long march through nationhood and development. The Filipino labor diaspora, estimated to consist of at least 10 million nationals, that roughly translate to 10% of the entire Philippine population, is but another iteration of our people's resilience and heroism. The migration of our people has been driven by a selfless force. More than the desire for personal advancement, the overseas migration of our people is moored in their unyielding commitment to serve family above self, and their ardent desire to make real for their loved ones a future much better than what they inherited. It is this commitment that has allowed them to endure conditions far harsher than loneliness for the survival and hopeful betterment of the ones they have left behind. The labor of our people across the seas, onshore and offshore, has had a tremendous impact on the quality of life of their families. Their labor not only finances the education of their children, it also secures for their entire family the precious chance to bolt out of poverty and march toward that promised life of relative comfort and dignity. Their selfless heroism has proved to be a lifesaver, not only for their immediate relatives. More importantly, it has contributed to our national resiliency, especially in times of global economic turbulence and regional crisis. Their dedication, competence, and skilled work have likewise positively impacted upon their host communities, sustained social and health services everywhere, and underwritten the growth in construction, engineering, maritime commerce, and other industries globally. This modern-day heroism proves the depth of the sacrifice that our people willingly embrace to affirm their love for family and nation. For despite every Filipino's incontrovertible preference to be here, in close physical proximity to family and friends, succinctly summed up by our national anthem in its lines, "Buhay ay langit sa piling mo." Our people's hope to improve their loved ones' future continuously sparks in them immense courage. It is this courage, this boldness of spirit, invoked by the image of a family living a decent life, that gives our anthem's last lines, "Ang mamatay ng dahil sa iyo," its most intimate meaning. Most recently, the Filipinos' irrefutable heroism has once again shown its light amidst the darkness of the pandemic. While fears of further contagion forced the closure of our borders, Filipino doctors, nurses, medical personnel, and professionals willingly stepped up to the front lines. They treated the sick and infected even when the medical and scientific community's knowledge of the disease was scarce and at great cost to themselves. As of last year, over 100 of our courageous medical frontliners, constituting a veritable heritage of our national medical expertise, have been forever lost in our fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. In turn, countless lives have been saved because of their selfless service and sacrifice. But it was not only in the sacrifice of the health professionals that we gleaned the Filipinos' innate heroism. That same virtue found iteration in the everyday bayanihan of the common tao. It was manifest in the contribution of the ordinary Filipino who, despite having so little, trooped to give back to community pantries so that those who were dislocated by the pandemic's disruptive effect on the economy could nevertheless make ends meet. It was confirmed by the voluntary acceptance of our countrymen of their duty to comply with health and safety protocols to mitigate the risk of further infection in our communities. It was reflected in the readiness of everyone, from non-government organizations, business owners and enterprises, and many other donors, to make available their property and resources just so we could fortify our strategy in combating the infection and mitigating its adverse aftermath. In this pandemic, our bayanihan has proved to be the most recent restatement of the Filipinos' persistent heroism. It is this heroism that we must summon anew as we face yet another daunting challenge in our national life. In a few weeks, our people will have to march once more to polling precincts and choose those who will lead us next. More than a right, suffrage is a duty. It is a duty of immeasurable importance and fraught with an enormous challenge. At no point in the life of this nation has the need to elect a competent and forward-looking government become more crucial than it is now. The pandemic has placed a tremendous strain on our economic capacity, while pressures from within and outside our borders continue to threaten our security and national sovereignty. The difficult task of jump-starting our economy to regain its momentum and of reasserting our independence in a climate of insecurity, among others, will require tremendous foresight and exceptional leadership skills. Unfortunately, the task of choosing our leaders who can meet this gigantic task is made more difficult by the emergence of fake news and the relative ease in which it is shared and distributed in social media and the virtual space. At the same time, the perennial problems of guns, goons, and gold make the manifestation of our people's true and genuine electoral mandate harder and more complicated. But it is precisely in this complex situation that we must trust in our people's discernment and their capacity for heroism to overcome political divisiveness with respectful social engagement and to conquer threats with bravery and determination to make known their electoral choice. Come Election Day, the Filipino will again march to the polls, unafraid and determined. They will do so in the tradition of the soldiers who, 80 years ago, marched in this province, unbowed neither by the threat nor by the certainty of great personal peril. Our Filipino brothers and sisters will march to the polls with as much hope and faith as the millions of Filipino workers who annually join our diaspora overseas with a vision of a better tomorrow as their wellspring of inspiration. Each of us will courageously cast and protect our vote so that it may be properly counted with the tenacity of those who march to the front lines so that others may be shielded from the threat of the pandemic. Come May, we shall once again manifest our capacity to think beyond the self, to vote wisely and with discernment, and to protect each vote on which the future of this country and people so precariously depends. Come May, we shall once again confirm how the imprint of heroism remains persistent in our national DNA. Naway maging patunay ang araw na iyon ng awit ng ating lahi. Ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagniningning. Ang bituin at araw niya, kailan pamay di magdidilim. Thank you at mabuhay ang bayang Pilipinas.
Thank you very much, Secretary Menardo I. Guevara of the Department of Justice. Please be seated. We'll now proceed with the presentation of the commemorative stamps to our guest of honor and speaker from the Philippine Postal Corporation representative, Ms. Zenaida O. Trambulo, and PAGCOR representative, or the Philippine Amusement Gaming Corporation, Ms. Maricel David. Would like to request Secretary Guevara, sir. Well, thank you very much to Secretary Guevara, and of course to the representatives of the Philippine Postal Corporation and PAGCOR. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before we wind up today's ceremony, we'd like to thank, of course, all those who gave their support for this commemoration of the 80th Araw ng Kagitingan. We have Governor Albert Garcia of the province of Bataan, Vice Governor Chris Garcia, Board Member Popoy Del Rosario, Mayor Charlie Pizarro and the LGU of Pilar, Mayor Jopet Inton and the LGU of Hermosa, Representative Jopet Garcia of the 2nd District of Bataan, Undersecretary Ramon Qualuping III of the Philippine Information Agency, Emmanuel Javier R. Guido of the Department of Interior and Local Government, Zenaida O. Trambulo of the Philippine Postal Corporation, of course from the PAGCOR or the Philippine Amusement Gaming Corporation, and we also would like to thank, of course, our members of the Diplomatic Corps from the Embassy of Japan, Embassy of Australia, Embassy of the United States, other diplomatic corps also watching virtually, as well as the foreign armed forces attaches. We also would like to thank, of course, Philippine National Police, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Department of Education, Department of Foreign Affairs, Philippine Veterans Affairs Office, other government agencies, other veterans organizations, as well as, of course, the Philippine Information Agency, Region 3. Well, at this point, ladies and gentlemen, of course, we end this commemoration of the 80th Araw ng Kagitingan. Sa inyo pong lahat ang aming taus-pusong pasasalamat at kayo po'y nakikiisa o nakiisa sa paggunita ng Araw ng Kagitingan at syempre po sa Linggo ng mga Veterano. Muli po nais nating pasalamatan ng ating butihing kalihim Menardo I. Guevara ng Kagawaran ng Hustisya. Palakpakan po natin ang ating guest of honor and speaker. Isa rin pong masigabong palakpakan para sa ating mga veterano. Mabuhay po ang ating mga veterano, mabuhay ang bansang Pilipinas.
Mabuhay ang ating mga veterano, mabuhay ang bansang Pilipinas. Diyan po officially nagtapos yung programa ng pagunita sa ika-80 anibersaryo ng Araw ng Kagitingan. Dito po yan sa Pilar, sa probinsya po ng Bataan. Mga kababayan, yung mga talumpati po ng mga guest o ng mga panauhin ngayong araw ay talagang sabi nga ng mga nanonood, tago sa puso dahil talagang makabayan, patriotic po yung laman o yung tema ng kanilang mga mensahe. Actually, bayan sa panalangin pa lamang ni Most Reverend Ruperto C. Santos Didi ng Diocese of Balangano ay talagang sumentro ito sa pasasalamat sa mga veterano sa pag-aalala sa kanilang mga sakripisyo. Ang sinasabi nga rin ni Bishop Santos kanina ay huwag dapat aksayahin ng mga Pilipino yung naging sakripisyo, yung mga efforts at mga nagawa ng ating mga veterano. Bayan, nagkaroon din po ng ceremonial bell tolling o itong pagbatingting sa kampana sa maliit na kampana, kulay gold yun, no, sa may stage, kung saan isang estudyante na si Miss Danoog yung nagbatingting noon. Actually, as far as I remember, nag-alay ng moment of silence at sa bawat batingting ay may 7 ibig sabihin noon. Ang unang pagbatingting o yung pag-unang pagtol ng bell, ang ibig sabihin niyan ay silence para sa mga nagmarcha doon nga sa tinatawag na Death March. Pangalawang pagbatingting para yan sa mga buhay na nawala, no, particularly yung mga kababayan natin na bumaba mula sa bundok at para makipaglaban sa mga mananakop noon. Pangatlong pagbatingting para yan, of course, sa mga sibilyan na naapektuhan ng digmaan. Pang-apat ay para sa mga gerilya. Pang-5 ay para sa mga official at civil servants na nagbuhos ng kanilang lakas until the very end ng kanilang mga buhay. Pang-6 bayan na batingting na ginawa kanina ay para sa mga kababaihan, sa mga kabataan na nadamay sa digmaan. Pang-7 para po yan sa mga veterano na hanggang ngayon ay nabubuhay pa rin. Sila po yung sabi nga rito, no, salamin ng kabayanihan ng mga bayaning lumaban sa mga mananakop noong unang panahon. Bayan, bukod diyan ay nagbigay rin ng mensahe si Governor Garcia ng Province of Bataan. Bago siya magbigay ng kanyang mensahe ay isang masigabong palakpakan yung inaalay bayan ng mga audience dito para sa mga veterano. Ang sinasabi nga ni Governor Garcia kanina ay lumaban yung mga veterano hindi lang para sa hindi lang para sa magkaroon tayo ng pag-alala o pagunita ngayong araw, kundi talagang yun ang ibig sabihin ng pagmamahal nila sa ating bayan. Samantala, bayan, sa mga sandaling ito ay kausapin natin ngayon live po, no, si Justice Secretary Minardo Guevara. Hi, magandang umaga, sir. Isang magiting na araw po sa inyo.
Magandang umaga, Alan.
Okay. Sir, oo, we heard yung inyong speech kanina, sir. Talagang sabi nga ng mga kasama ko rito, makabagbag damdamin, makabayan. Especially, sir, yung mensahe ninyo sa ating mga kababayan. So, sir, pwede po bang pakiulit, sir, pakisabi yung talagang importansya ng pagunita ng Araw ng Kagitingan sa ating mga kababayan? Please, sir, ito po yung camera, sir.
Okay, sinasad ko lang dun sa aking mensahe, no, on behalf of the President of our country, na ang heroismo ay kumbaga nakatatak na sa ating mga sarili, no. Mula nung tayo ay magkaroon ng Death March dito sa probinsya ng Bataan, at even before that, no, at even before that, hanggang sa heroismo na pinakita ng ating mga overseas workers na nagpapagod para sa ikabubuti ng kanilang pamilya, that is beyond themselves, no, hindi para sa sarili nila yon, kundi para sa kanilang mga pamilya at ganoon din para sa ating bayan, no. Ang heroismo ng mga frontliners natin noong panahon ng pandemic ay isang pagbabadya rin, no, na ang heroismo kumbaga ay nakatatak na sa ating dugo. Ngayon sa aking mensahe kanina, sa aking maiksing speech ay binanggit ko na ang heroismong ito ay kinakailangan nating ipakitang muli sa nalalapit na eleksyon. Dahil ang eleksyon na ito ay napaka-significant, no, napakahalaga, naiiba itong darating na election kasi kailangan na ipakita natin ang ating pagiging tunay na Pilipino dahil kailangan ang ating maihalal ay yung mga pinuno na mamumuno sa atin, no, mula sa pagkakalugmok ng ating bayan. Kasi ang pinanggagalingan natin ay isang critical na panahon sa ating history, no? Yung pandemic na tumama sa ating lahat, isang kalaban na hindi natin nakikita pero marami sa atin ang napinsala. Yan ay napakalaki ng naging epekto rin sa ating economy. Ang administrasyon ni Presidente Duterte ay ginawa ang lahat ng pupwedeng gawin para ma-minimize ang epekto niyang pandemya na yan, no? Ngunit hindi dyan nagtatapos ang kailangan gawin ng pamunuan ng administrasyon. Kaya nga itong eleksyon na ito ay mahalaga dahil ang mga susunod na pinuno ng ating bayan ang mamumuno sa recovery, sa muling pagbangon natin mula dito sa pagkakalugmok na ito. Kaya ang heroismo na ating ginugunita ngayong araw na ito ay muli nating ipakita sa pagdating ng eleksyon sa Mayo. Kailangan natin yan. Kailangan ng ating bayan.
Okay. Sir, nasabi ninyo masusubok o talagang ma-exercise ng mga kababayan natin yung pagiging magiting sa pagitan ng pagboto sa eleksyon. Sir, can you cite some characteristics ng leader na dapat iboto ng ating mga kababayan? Go ahead, sir.
Unang-una ay dapat ang ating ihahalal ay yung mga tao na mayroong vision, na mayroong programa na maliwanag kung paano maiaahon ang ating bayan sa pagkakalugmok, no? Ngayon ay unti-unti na tayong bumabangon. Kaya kung tayo ay magpapabaya sa pagpili ng ating mga susunod na mamumuno ng ating bayan, ay maaaring maudlot ang pagbangon na ito. Kaya piliin natin ang mga kandidato, ang mga mamumuno sa atin na mayroong talagang maliwanag na vision kung paano isasagawa ang pagbangon na ito. At bilang kagawad, bilang Secretary ng Justice ay muli kong pinapaalala sa mga tao na iwasan ang pagbebenta ng inyong boto at ang paniniwala sa mga fake news. Dahil alalahanin ninyo na ang ating gagawin sa darating na eleksyon ay hindi para sa atin lamang, hindi para sa kakainin lamang sa susunod na 1 o 2 araw. Ang gagawin natin sa Mayo 9 ay para sa ating mga anak, para sa ating mga susunod na henerasyon. Kaya mahalaga na ang ating pagboto ay lagay natin sa wasto at tama.
Okay. Sir, maganda yung naging mensahe nyo kanina na bukod sa mga magigiting nating frontliners, mga medical frontliners, pati yung mga common tao ay magigiting. Can you elaborate that, sir?
Yan ay nabanggit ko dahil nung panahon ng pandemic, kung natatandaan nyo, ay nagtulong-tulong din ang mga karaniwang tao, no, na para maibsan ang problema na dulot ng pandemya. No? Kamukha nung, kung natatandaan nyo yung mga community pantries, na wala namang kumbaga nag-udyok sa atin na gawin yun. Pero kusang loob na mga tao na kahit na maliliit na magugulay lamang ay nagbibigay doon sa mga community pantry para makatulong sa kanyang kapwa. Yung mga maliliit na bagay na yan ay mga acts of heroism yan na pagka pinagsama-sama natin ay malaki ang impact sa ating komunidad.
Okay. So with that, maraming salamat, sir, sa oras na inyong inaalay for this event. At ulitin ko po, sir, isang magiting na araw sa inyo, sir.
Maraming salamat at ganun din po sa lahat ng nanonood.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yan po, nakakausap natin si Secretary Menardo Guevara ng Department of Justice. Siya po yung panauhing pandangal dito sa katatapos lamang na Araw ng Kagitingan 80th o ika-80 anibersaryo ngayong 2022. Bayan, yung nangyaring digmaan sa Bataan ay talagang sabi nga nila naging masalimuot, mahirap para sa ating mga kababayan. Sa nabanggit nga kanina, no, ay libo-libong mga sundalong Pilipino at Amerikano yung talagang pinahirapan hanggang sa nawala ng buhay. At ang sinasabi nga kanina ng mga opisyal, yung pagiging bayani, yung pagiging magiting ay marami pang paraan para maisakatuparan ito. Siyempre, hindi natin kalilimutan yung mga ginawa ng ating mga veterano. Sabi nga nila, halata sa kanilang mga physical appearance, yung katandaan, pero yung ating mga veterano, yung kanilang mga kontribusyon sa bayan, hindi po tatanda yan. Talagang mananatili yan mula noon hanggang ngayon. At sa susunod na henerasyon, talagang dapat baunin natin yan. Kaya siguro ang dapat rin gawin ng ating mga kababayan, lalo na ng mga kabataan, no, ay talagang isa puso, isa isip yung mga ginawa ng ating mga bayani. Bayan, i-remind ko lamang po, no, yung nangyaring event ngayon ay of course sumunod sila sa health protocols dahil ang sinasabi nga ng organizer, dahil nasa pandemic o may pandemic pa rin tayo, kaya kapansin-pansin po yung kanilang pagsusuot ng face mask at yung kanilang pagpapanatili ng social distancing. Bagamat kakaiba yung pagunita ngayong araw dahil limitado lamang yung number of participants or audience na dumalo, unlike nung pre-pandemic era. Dahil talagang dinadagsa ito, may mga estudyante, may mga guro na pumupunta rito. Pero ngayon, limitado lamang para syempre iwas sa pagkalat ng COVID-19 virus. Bayan, sa mga sandaling ito, ramdam ko yung init. Ayan po siguro yung init ng pasalamat nating mga Pilipino sa ating mga veteranong sundalo. Kanina nga, mas konti yung dumalo sa kanila dahil marahil yung iba pa sa kanila ay para na rin sa kabutihan ng kanilang kalusugan ay hindi na dumalo, no? Dahil alam naman po natin bayan na nasa pandemic pa rin tayo. So, yung nasaksihan po natin bayan, kaninang umaga hanggang sa mga sandaling ito ay sana huwag lang rin po natin panoorin, kumbaga parang papasok sa kanang tenga, lalabas sa kaliwa. Ang dapat po nating gawin bayan, isa puso at talagang gawin yung mga simpleng kabayanihan gaya nga po ng sinabi ni Secretary Minardo Guevara. Hindi lamang po yung mga medical frontliners, of course, magpapasalamat rin tayo ngayon sa mga bayani sa ating mga community, sa mga nagsasagawa ng community pantry, sa mga delivery riders, of course. Kung wala yan, lalo na nung kasagsagan ng pandemic, hindi po ma-deliver sa atin ang ating mga pagkain at iba pang mga pangangailangan. Of course, salamat po sa ating mga sundalo at pulis na kahit pandemic ay talagang napanatili yung kaayusan sa mga guro na buong tiyagang nagtuturo kahit na online sa ating mga mag-aaral. Of course, bayan, salamat sa mga magulang na talagang hindi bumitiw at hindi bibitiw sa kanilang mga anak, lalo na para itaguyod ang kanilang mga pag-aaral sa gitna nga ng COVID-19 pandemic. Bayan, dito na po magtatapos ang ating special coverage kaugnay nga yan ng 80 anibersaryo ng Araw ng Kagitingan. Maraming salamat po sa mga sumaybaybay at mula rito sa bayan po ng Pilar, particularly po sa may Mount Samat, no, sa Mount Samat National Shrine. Dito pa rin yan sa probinsya ng Bataan. Magpapaalam na po kami at kasama of course ang Unit 3 ng PTV. Ako po si Alan Francisco. Salamat po sa ating mga veterano. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas.
Lahat tayo gigil makabangon. Lahat tayo handa na sa hamon. Kaya sabay-sabay tayong tumutok sa entrepreneur